Daniel chapter 3. God can do anything He wants to do. Is that right?
Amen.
I mean, can God do anything He wants to do? Well, yeah. He made the universe. He made us. He made time. He made, He made everything. So He can do anything He wants to do. I believe that. Nothing's too hard for Him. Now, He does everything. He can do anything He wants to do. But does He always answer every prayer? Oh, yeah. Yeah, He answers every prayer. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Yeah. How many of you ever heard the no? We don't hear many testimonies, services about the times God said no. But boy, if we'd had, probably He does you more favors by saying no than saying yes, if the truth be known. Why does He not always do what I think He ought to do? Why is that? Well, you see, God has a perspective on life that's different than ours. He sees my life, your life, not just in a moment of time, but He sees my life in a panorama of past, present, and future. Then He goes on to see what my life does, not just in my lifetime, but what it does in the lives of others. So there is so much more that goes into a decision or an answer to prayer than we would imagine. So God has the ability to know how to answer the question correctly, even though I may disagree with Him. Now, there was a man by the name of Hezekiah. He was one of the kings of Israel in the ancient world, Judah in the ancient world, and he wanted to live longer. He was sick. He was dying. And he prayed, and he said, God, would you please let me live? Don't end my life now. I'm not through. I want to live some more. And God said, okay, I'm going to let you live longer. And He added 15 years to his life. That tells you right there, God can do anything He wants to do. But during that 15 years, something really, to me, seems like out of God's plan happened. The people from Babylon made a trip up. They were just looking around the countryside. The emissaries of Babylon came, and they came to Jerusalem. And Hezekiah showed them the temple, and showed them all the gold and silver and everything, all the precious artifacts in the temple. And I can see them sitting there going, 14 times. And they were writing it all down, taking note of all the gold in the temple. Now, when Isaiah found out about what Hezekiah had done, Isaiah threw a fit. He was mad because he knew that Hezekiah had done something horrible to the future of the Jews, because those Babylonians would like to have that gold, and he knew that set in motion some problems. But nevertheless, that happened. But had Hezekiah not lived an extra 15 years, that might not have happened that way. And the children of Israel might not have been taken into captivity into Babylon. And they might not have been cured of their idolatry that God had planned for them to be cured of. You see, when they came home from Babylon, they were never idolatrous again. There's never been any idolatry in Israel, in Judah, anymore. It was cured. Babylon fixed it. Now, I'm not saying they're perfect, and I'm not saying they've all turned back to Yahweh or to God, but I'm telling you that ended the idolatry. See how that was so circuitous, and how, as we used to say, he had to go around Robin Hood's barn to get what he wanted done, but he started it 15 years ago, after adding 15 years to Hezekiah's life. God is complicated. He does things we can't understand. He's working out details, scenarios that's bigger than us. Also, I remember a time when the Philistines stole the Ark of the Covenant. Now, the Jews would say, well, we're going to get in a fight. Let's just get the Ark of the Covenant, bring it out. When the Ark goes, wherever the Ark goes, we win. Because the Ark gives power, and it's our strength, it's our whatever. So they were in a battle one day. They didn't bring the Ark. And they were fighting, and they got to losing. The Philistines started whipping up on them. So they sent some boys back to the ark, to the temple, and said, get the ark and bring it out here. So they went and got the ark, brought it out there. And when they got out there, the army still got whipped. And the enemy stole the Ark of the Covenant and took it down into the Philistine country. Well, did you know God can take care of Himself? Amen. Has anybody here, have you figured that out yet? God doesn't need my help, and He doesn't need your help. He can take care of Himself. So the Ark of the Covenant got to be a pain and a problem, and I don't know all the details, I don't want to get into it, but it caused bad stuff to happen to those Philistine boys. and in the country, a lot of people got sick, a lot of people died. So one day we look up and here comes the ark heading for Jerusalem, being pulled by 2 cows. All right, on a sled. They just sent it home. They turned the cows loose and said, take that thing somewhere, we don't care where. And those cows made a beeline for Jerusalem. Wonder how they knew to do that. So I'm just joking. 6 million people were killed in the Holocaust. 6 million of God's chosen people. Jews. Why did He let that happen? Can you imagine the 6 million prayers multiplied by millions of times? And God answered that prayer over and over again. No, no. How? What? Do I have an answer? Absolutely not. Do I get it? No. But here's what I tell you. I choose to love and follow Him even if He doesn't do what I think He should. I still choose to follow Him. Anybody agree with me? Amen. I'm going to follow Him even though I don't understand what He's doing. I remember the time Jesus in John chapter 17 was in the Garden of Gethsemane waiting the day of crucifixion. It was His day. Jesus tomorrow would have been crucified. In fact, that night it started. He was in the garden and He prayed a prayer and said, Father, if there's some way we could do this, I'm translating into, as I say, Walnut Grove English. If there's some way we can do this and not involve the cross, let's do it that way. Did you realize Jesus prayed that prayer? He said, could we do it some other way? Could we save the world without me being crucified and having to die? He actually prayed that prayer. Do you know how He ended the prayer? Nevertheless, Thy will be done. So this morning, the title of my sermon is, Even if He doesn't, or Nevertheless, Thy will be done. In other words, God may have a better plan than we, and we may not always understand what He's doing, but we need to trust Him. I choose to love and follow Him, even if He doesn't always do what I think He should. Let's get into the book here of chapter 3 of Daniel. We're going to talk now about an image of gold and a blazing furnace. You've heard the story. We all grew up on this story. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time telling you this story again, even though it's so precious. I'm going to try to bring a few things to you that you may have overlooked in just a cursory reading or in a Bible school class or whatever. And so, but nevertheless, we're going to look into this image of gold. Let's just read a little bit here, starting in chapter 3. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold 60 cubits high, 6 cubits wide, and set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all other government provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before it. Okay, I can just see them standing out there with their mouths hanging open, all standing, the whole government of Babylon. Now, see, the government of Babylon was the leading government of the world. All right, it's like Russia and America and Canada, all the government, everybody's standing out there together, all standing before the statue. I can just see them. Can't you tell? What are we doing out here? Look at this dumb statue. Anyway, I can just see a bunch of politicians standing around. That's what I'm saying. Talking about stuff. In the story that we read just before this, in chapter 2, Daniel interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Do you remember that? And he saw this script. Thursday night we went through all the history of this. We walked down through the history of the Babylonians, the Medo-Persians, the Greek, the Romans. And we got down to the toes, and we talked about the mixing of America and Europe and how they would. Anyway, we talked about all that Thursday night. If you weren't here, YouTube. It's on YouTube Sunday. It will be. But look at that sermon over because you need to know what's going on. But in that, I think what happened, Nebuchadnezzar said, "I'd like to have me a statue like that." So he's doing anything you want to do. So he had this statue made, and he made it out of gold. Wonder where he got some of this gold. I know where he got some of it. All right. Now, so it's possible he wanted to recreate that and probably be worshipped. So this golden statue, I suspect it looked like him. His ego was of the such that probably he made it to look like him. And he was about to see the power of a God he didn't believe in. That's what he was about to see. So at the signal, everybody bows to the statue of Nebuchadnezzar had this statue, so they're all going to bow to it. Let's read verse 4. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, nations and the herald, that was his publicity agent that spoke to the people on TV and all that. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, nations and peoples of every language, this is what you're commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Now, what we've got going on here is worship or else. Right? It's like when I was a kid, when you woke up on Sunday morning, you went to church or else. You anybody else like that? Mm-hmm. You went to church or else. Well, that's what it was here. You're going to go to church. You're going to worship. Then he says, verse 6, whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. Now today, if you're going to get the capital punishment, you get about, a 6-month trial, and then 10 years of waiting on death row, and 4 years of sitting in the electric chair. You know what I'm saying? It's a long deal. Okay, but it's immediately going to throw into the blazing furnace. Now, what's going on here is we have direct Ten Commandment violation. We have a direct Ten Commandment violation. Now, these Jews weren't going to worship anything else but God. I mean, there's 3 that I can think of in the Ten Commandments that talk about, thou shalt have no other God before me, no images, no, His name. In other words, there's a lot of stuff about how you deal with God, and every one of them were going to be broken when you bow down to this golden idol. So the boys that we're going to talk about in a moment, we're not going to do it. So they had to decide if it were better to face the fire than to face God. So they had to decide, am I going to face God or am I going to face the fire? What do I do? By the way, this is very important. There was no plan C. No plan C. No loophole. You worship the statue or you burned. You with me? No plan C. And that's important. I'll bring it out later in the sermon. So everybody bowed. Let's read verse 7. Everybody bowed. At least that's what the writer said here. Daniel said, therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, the flute, the orchestra, and all the nations and the music of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Now, as a good storyteller tells a story, he will sometimes tell a little bit of the story, then he'll take you back and give you a little background. Well, Daniel is going to do this now in verse 8. We're going to step back for verse 8 because verse 8 comes before the others in the historical chronology. So let's go back and look at verse 8. And when we do, we realize this whole thing's a setup. This whole thing's they're trying to get to these Jews. All right? It's a setup. All this deal. They tricked the king into doing this. They're trying to get rid of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They pulled a con on him. Let's go back and see if we can figure out what's going on. Verse 8. At this time, some astrologers. What's an astrologer? Horoscope, zodiac people. I mean, these guys made a living telling the king what to do because of whether Leo was in the sky or Aquarius or whatever. So they made their living interpreting the zodiac for Nebuchadnezzar. All right. So at some time, they weren't Jews, because who did the Jews use to tell the king the future? God. You begin to see there's a problem developing. Let's keep reading. So at this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. Well, verse 9. They said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, may you live forever, wonderful king. Your majesty has issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipe, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold, and that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. Okay. Now it's beginning to make a little sense to us. Some people were trying to get back at these people, and they've talked Nebuchadnezzar into doing this. So, but here's the real problem. Now, I'm going to tell you this little story, this little scenario, and then you're going to get it. If you're not the lead dog on the snow sled, the view never changes. You understand? Yeah. The view is always the same, unless you're the front dog. And these astrologers were having to play second and third and fourth, fifth dog down the line. They was always looking at the dog in front of them. And the dogs in front of them were these Jews, and they didn't like it. So the one who stands up and leads, by the way, if you ever want a real education, stand up and try to lead people. They're like trying to lead cats, you know what I'm saying? But because when you're standing up and leading, you make a good target. You're the one everybody wants to oppose and be better than. So it's a real education, those of you who led. But if you ever think you want to try it, go ahead, it'll be fun. You'll enjoy it for a while. Now, these Jewish men did nothing wrong. Listen to me very carefully. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did nothing wrong. They were wonderful men, godly, God-honoring, biblical. They followed the Bible. They were ethical, they're moral. They did everything wrong. They were faithful. But they were miserably mistreated. They were good, but they were treated miserably. Does anybody in here ever had to question about your own life because you've tried to do the right thing? You've tried to live right. You've tried to honor God and keep your commitments, and still yet you got kicked in the rear, or you got stepped on, or messed with. You understand? And you had to question, what is going on? Why is this happening? Just remember, God is in control, and He knows what He's doing. Just keep that in mind. Let's keep reading. Life is not easy, and sometimes it just doesn't work at all. So here's where this sermon's going to go today. We're going to start reading here in verse 13 in just a moment. And here's the sermon today. Are you ready for the sermon? Here it is. Every one of us will have our day in the furnace.
Amen.
Every person in this room will have your day in the furnace. Some of you already had it. Some of you had lots of days in the furnace. But if you live very long, you're going to have your time. You're going to be standing there at the furnace, looking at the hot fire, and you're going to have to decide, furnace or God?
Right.
Furnace or God? Right. Now, I've got some good news for you a little bit later in the moment. When you choose God, you get the furnace and God. Amen?
Amen.
But if you choose not to go in, the story's not as come out as good. Okay, I'm going to tell you 3 things you need to know today when you stand at the furnace. When you're standing looking and they've opened the door of the furnace. Now, what is the furnace? Well, the doctor's office, the lawyer's office, I don't know, wherever it happened, wherever you get that bad news, the telephone, where the news is coming in, the email, and you read this and you're thinking, oh my, here we go. Here we go. What are we going to do? It's awful. Okay, that's your furnace. Now, when you stand at that furnace, there's 3 things you need to know. Number 1, you must stand for God no matter what it costs. No matter what the cost is, you must stand for God. Are you with me? Do you agree with that? Okay, let's read verse 13. Furious with rage, in other words, Nebuchadnezzar is mad now, because we've gone back, remember. Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods, or worship the image of the God I have set up? Now," I can just see it pointing his finger. He says, "Now, when you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipe, all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace." And then he said, "Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" Man, he just, okay, corral, showdown. Then what God's going to rescue you? My gods or your? We'll see. Test time. Okay. Why was Nebuchadnezzar so mad? Well, nobody ever stood up to him before, probably, in his life. I bet he got everything he wanted all his whole life, so nobody stood up to him. But now these Jews are standing up to him, and they're saying no. Now, and he just couldn't put up with that. He wouldn't honor it. Now, let me say to you, there are a lot of choices we have to make in our life. And people are watching your choices, and your testimony depends upon it. And the honor of God depends upon those things. So be careful how you live your life. Now I want you to read verse 15 again with me, the last part of it. Nebuchadnezzar, see here, the problem with him is he'd never met God before. He wouldn't have said that if he'd ever met the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He said, well, what God can stand up before you now? Well, he hadn't met the real God yet, had he? He thought he was in control of everything, but he wasn't. Everything was not under His control. Now let me tell you about these Jewish boys. They didn't have to stand around and think a long time about what they'd do. They didn't call a committee meeting and say, well, what are we going to do? They already knew what they were going to do. How did they already know what they were going to do? Because they had made commitments to the Lord early in life. They had already said how they were going to live life, how they were going to end life. They already had decided in their heart they were going to stand for God no matter what. All right, they'd already made that decision. So when the time came, they had already said in their heart, we will follow the Lord. So they just did what they had always done. It wasn't something new. It was something they had always done. Do you see how easy this gets if you stand for the Lord all your life? It's easier. You don't have to think, what am I going to do? You already decided. Already decided. You're going to stand or kneel. You're going to stand. Now, number two. Point number two that I want you to get with me today is, number one, your day's coming. How are you going to do? Stand for God. And number two, God can rescue us, but He may choose not to. Yeah. God can rescue, but He may choose not to. Read verse 16. Folks, I want to tell you something. This is one of the verses. When we get down to verse 18, I stand amazed at verse 18. Every time I read it, I want to just stand and say, God, thank you for those men. Let me read it, and you'll see what I'm saying. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. And He will deliver us from your majesty's hand. Verse 18, here it is. But even if He does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. He can save us, God. We know it, Nebuchadnezzar. God can. But if He doesn't, you need to know this, it doesn't make any difference. It doesn't matter. We're going to serve God. Have you decided to say that in your life? Are you saying that every day in your life now? Begin practicing it. Say it how you live, how you work, how you interact with people, how you relate with people. Say it in your home. Say it at work. Say it at school. Say it. It doesn't matter. Whatever happens, I'm going to stand for God. Just do the worst you can. I am amazed at these young men for having said that. These were young men away from home who had this kind of moral courage. Now, the third thing I want to tell you this is when you stand at the fire, you're not going to be in the fire alone. You're not going to be in the fire alone. When you get in there, when you get in the middle of it, the sickness, the loss of loved one, the failing job, when you're in that situation, you're going to find a great source of strength when you get into it. I'm going to talk to you just a little bit today, even out of my own personal life. Let's read verse 19. Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed, and he ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual, and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in the army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men wearing their robes, trousers, and turbans and other clothing were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent, and the furnace was so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leapt to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? They replied, certainly, your majesty. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed. And the 4th looks like the Son of God. Oh my goodness. Jesus meets us in the fire. I want to tell you, this is just a personal reflection that I don't normally talk about myself a lot. I don't like to, but the Lord impressed me to say to you today, I have had 3 major illnesses and 2 accidents. Any of the 5 could have ended my life or ended my ministry. Any of those 5. 5 different serious things. I had rheumatic fever as a young man. Guillain-Barré syndrome. That's like polio. Similar to it. Ankylosing spondylitis, which I still have. That's why I have no neck. And then I had a horse wreck that broke so many bones I don't even count them. And then I had a farming accident that broke my back. And all everybody says, "Oh, poor guy." No, that's not why I'm saying that. I want you to know that every time I was in that fire, the Lord was in there with me. Every time. Every time. He was there. I mean, He was there. I knew He'd be there. I mean, when I was laying in the ditch with my Labrador Retriever laying on top of me after the horse thrown me in, and my lab laid on me to comfort me. He didn't know he's killing me, but he did. But he didn't know what else to do, so he just laid down on me. And even when I was there, I knew the Lord was going to be in that fire with me. I knew it. He'd take me home if I died. I didn't know if I was going to live or die. That's fine. I didn't care because I knew the Lord was in the fire with me. There wasn't just 2 men walking in the fire. There was 3 and a black dog. So anyway. Oh, and one thing I forgot to tell you. I'm a recovering anorexic also. I need to add that to the list of things. You're going. I love the way you get these stories, these jokes. They kind of go in waves. Okay, I'll leave it as it was. So if God chooses to intervene in your life, He'll come out with no harm, but He may choose not to intervene, and that's okay too. Because these boys, if you want to read the rest of them, I'm not going to take the time this morning, but everything works out fine for them. But it didn't work out so good for some other people around them. But nevertheless, it worked out good for God's people. And they came with no harm at all. But again, understand, God chooses to do the best thing for the kingdom of God. And that's what I pray too. I always say, God, I want it to be within your will and bless what you're doing. So here's what I'm going to tell you to do. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to ask for and seek to grow the kind of faith that believes God can do anything. And that's the kind of faith we need to have. God can do anything. And I believe that with all my heart. But He also knows that we need to know that sometimes He doesn't answer our prayer the way we pray them. And it's always going to be for the best when He does. Those things I want you to know today. Because I sense in my heart that all of you, at one time or another, will be walking through the fire. If you haven't last week, you will next week. It's just how this works. When you get in the fire, He's in the fire.